The time being 7 p.m., you are now welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of March 6, 2025. Just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being taped by WCTV. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. We'll start with the roll call. John Doherty, excused. Mary Young?
Here.
Chris
Here.
Diorio? Brad Jackson?
Here.
Andy Levine? Joe Levino?
Here.
Anthony Nelson?
Here.
Scott Neville?
Here.
And myself, Teresa Manganelli. And I believe Mr. Jackson would like to make a statement
Yeah,
before we begin.
I just for the record, I do want to state that I am a former employee of the Wilmington Public Schools, and I am a former employee of Shawshene Tech. My daughter currently teaches at Wilmington Middle School, and I currently receive my retiree health benefits through Shawshene Tech. I've consulted with experts on conflict of interest, and I've been assured that since we only vote on the recommendation on the bottom line, that I am cleared to fully participate in these conversations, but I do think it's important to state those potential conflicts for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so our first order of business is to welcome Wilmington Public Schools. Dr. Brand?
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, Glen Brand, privilege and pleasure to serve as the superintendent of the Wilmington Public Schools. And alongside me is my colleague, many of you know, Paul Ruggiero, that will co-share the presentation that we'll go through tonight to help guide the conversation. But before we begin, if I can, just take this opportunity to both introduce and thank many others who are responsible for us to be here tonight and with this budget proposal. In order, we have Christine Elliott, who's behind us here in the audience, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Staff Development. Christine Murray, who is our Interim Director of Student Support Services. Ken Lord, Director of Information Technology and Digital Learning. And Andrea Stern-Armstrong, Director of Human Resources. In addition, many thanks to our school committee, members of whom are here this evening, starting with our chair, Mr. Jesse Fennelly, Dr. Bryson, Jen Bryson, who is the vice chair this year, Mr. Stephen Turner, who's our secretary, Mr. Nick Golden, Dr. McCaldy, Mike McCaldy, Mr. Ragsdale, and Mr. Samaha. So with that, I want to give credit to them and thank you for their partnership in getting us here this evening. The slide deck, I'm happy to send this along. We'll go through the slide deck that's here on the screen, and certainly welcome to send those to members following tonight's meeting. It will serve as sort of the storyline for the presentation and the documentation that you have, and certainly welcome questions from members of the committee either along the way or at the end. I think first to start, I think most anyone who has been watching the headlines, I don't think it's just in Massachusetts, it's far and wide. This is a challenging time for a lot of organizations and public entities. Public education is no exception. So just to sort of bring focus to that here in Massachusetts, this is a significantly challenging financial time for many. The headlines are far and wide. I receive a daily update of headlines through the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, daily headlines for education, and there's really not a day that goes by, sadly, in which many districts are struggling financially for a host of reasons, some of which we'll talk about in a moment. These are budget shortfalls, both in the current fiscal years, as well as many who are facing deficits for fiscal year 26. And while certainly no one community is the same as another, I think if you take a few moments, if anyone were to dig in, there are common through lines or threads that are showing up, of which we'll talk about some, and that hold true here for the Wilmington Public Schools. The uniqueness of this time period, and I think it is a little bit more unique because of this sort of perfect storm, has led to, and I've never seen this before, Dr. Jackson, you've a few more years than I in these roles, but I don't think we've seen it in our time in terms of the collaboration to put forth a common and joint statement, inclusive of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, the Massachusetts School Business Officials, and the Association of School Superintendents, bringing focus to this challenge that districts like ours are facing. There's a whole host of reasons for this captured here. Federal funding for the pandemic recovery has expired. and that certainly holds true for Wilmington. There are a number of significant expenses that are rising, non-salary costs, particularly services for such things as out-of-district tuition and transportation for students with disabilities. We'll touch a little bit more upon that in our budget plan shortly. Chapter 70, the largest source of state funding for schools, has not increased. This is a common source of discussion throughout the Commonwealth, but it's certainly important to cite. It is not tracking with inflation. The circuit breaker program, this is one of those terms that we often throw around in our business. I know that, but circuit breaker, for those that are not familiar, is a really important offset for out-of-district special education tuitions, for which districts like ours do benefit from, but it's not fully funded, and that has consequences for programs and services that we're trying to deliver. It is not a one-year snapshot problem. There is concern that this is growing and it's going to compound over time. That really led to the joint statement that I mentioned a moment ago. I do have copies if members of the committee are interested here. I'm happy to give those out later. You can find it online, but I have hard copies here. There are a lot of headlines that I could have incorporated into the slides, and I'm starting this way just to bring some context to it, because I think what you'll see along as we go is, while there's some bleak headlines in many places, we are not one of these headlines, and that's for a lot of hard work and planning collectively we'll talk about. But these realities are out there, and they are a struggle, as I mentioned earlier, for a lot of communities. These are just some of the many. Amherst Regional School District, in January, up to 24 staff positions that they're looking to eliminate in order to contend with a budget deficit of a little bit over $1 million. Andover Public Schools, not too far from here, they are right now considering heavily the elimination of 24 full-time positions for the next school year to close a $1.8 million budget deficit. Hingham contending with a fairly significant drop in enrollment, and also a $1.6 million cuts related to a lot of positions that they're taking a look at. Fortunately, I would suggest and offer that this bleakness does not hold true here, but there is absolutely growing concern that if these pressures continue financially, we are going to also be in a difficult spot. But with all of that as sort of the backdrop, let's jump into the fiscal year 26 budget plan and the development process that we go through. So one of the things that I'm proud of, and I think our school committee is as well, is the opportunity for many chances for members of our community here in Wilmington to learn more about the budget as it's taking shape and unfolds. We followed the similar pathway or trajectory, if you will, of the past number of recent years. We start early in December, and as I say all the time, it's, if you back up from that, the budget planning that starts to come out from Paul's office to our principals and leadership really happens almost after school begins. And so it's projecting for some time out, and there's a lot of uncertainty around what those needs are, but it is part of the process to get to this point tonight. The preliminary budget presentation was presented to the school committee on December the 18th. The recommended budget presentation, January 22nd, and then the public budget hearing, of which we have to comply with according to Mass General Law, took place on February the 12th. So for those that are in our community and we're interested in how sort of this has taken shape, all of those presentations include accompanying documentation that we work hard to try and make accessible on the district website. There are a number of budget drivers for fiscal year 26. Some of these I touched upon a few moments ago, but out-of-district transportation costs for special education students has risen considerably, and it is incorporated into this budget plan. Out-of-district tuition costs, well, we have worked very hard, and we'll touch upon this a little bit later tonight, around trying to build in-district programs for many of our students that have higher special education-related needs. It's inevitable that any district will still have some students that will need to receive education outside of the school district. We refer to those as out-of-district tuition costs. They come with the tuition cost, and we have to factor that into our budget plan. Obviously, there are contractual obligations with approximately 80% of our costs going towards supporting the people that work day in and day out in service of the children of Wilmington. Also some expansion of those in-district programs, the fourth bullet there that we'll touch upon. and additional resources for English language education. We talked a little bit more extensively about this last year, that the reality for our population here in Wilmington is ever changing, and this one facet of this is the expansion of number of students that we have enrolled here in our district for whom English is not their first language. And as such, we need to respond accordingly and add resources to respectively meet their needs. We have talked before about special education and the associated costs. It is one of the budget drivers, as I mentioned. We very carefully, through our Office of Student Support Services, the leadership of Ms. Murray and her team, work to do what we can to build and maintain programs to keep students in district. We think that that's best for a whole host of reasons, educationally, socially, also economically, and it continues to be at the forefront of our thinking and planning. These are more intensive programs, but certainly they're important to meet many of our students' needs. We take a look at this very carefully around tracking enrollment and, as the best we can, predict what the known needs are for the year ahead. So right now, through this planning process, we obviously have a very clear sense of our students that are enrolled in our district right now and what their programmatic needs are. The reality is that that can change at any moment. We could have a new student or students that move in next week, or a month from now, or 3 months from now that we haven't been able to plan accordingly for, but we continually track and very carefully identify those needs to try and build programs. Similarly, if there's no longer a need for a program, we reduce that program. And we try and be very mindful of that to respond accordingly. We've done that, and we'll talk about that, we've done that this year going into next year's budget. We also know, for example, that we have a small group of students right now that are matriculating through the school system. They're moving to the Woburn Street School in this particular case. We don't have a program there right now to meet their needs, so we need to add some staff to support those students. So those are just the ebbs and flows I share with you to give a sense of how closely we would try and monitor and in turn build our budget around. This is I know there's a lot of information on this slide. We've talked about this recently with the school committee, but really before that. And to me, really the important story here is this work that has been ongoing, that started certainly before my arrival and under our previous leadership in the Office of Student Support Services, but recognizing that at one time we did have an awful lot of students that were out of district here in Wilmington. There is no hard and fast number. If one was to say, well, is there a right size for that? Is there a right number that a district should aim for? The answer is no. But the state offers some guidance and others around what's a number that should reasonably sort of be reflective of the overall enrollment. We've worked hard to try and bring that number down, which in turn has an impact on out-of-district tuitions. But there is a corresponding impact that we've talked previously about around the need to expand personnel and staffing. This snapshot here, we came up with as a way to try and provide a little more insight in terms of what some of the intensive needs are from a staffing standpoint for some of these programs that I'm speaking of. Right now, we offer 9 specialized, or intensive programs throughout the district. So these are not your regular education classroom settings. Think about a 3rd grade class of 20 students. These are reflective of a whole host of identified specialized needs that we shape a program around in order to deliver appropriate services. What you can see here is through these programs, this table shows, we have different identifiers for these programs. Under the program column on the left is the name of the program, for example, Strides in the first row, and that's a program that serves students with autism. And you can see the corresponding programs down the line, 9 programs in total. But then in turn, there are a certain number of classrooms, depending on the grade level, that corresponds with that program. So for example, the top row, we right now are operating 8 classrooms for the Strides strand, if you will. You can see the number of students. That's the 3rd column from the left. So at the time of putting this together, this may have changed slightly. But the Strides programs currently serves 40 students in district. Those are 40 Wilmington Public Schools students. You can see the number of teachers that's required to support those programs, and then in turn, the number of educational assistants. I won't go through this line by line, but you get an overall sense here, I hope, of what these programs look like, where they lie or where they rest in our 8 schools throughout the district, and how many students are being served. And this has been obviously a source of some conversation with the school committee and with the finance committee around trying to get at some of the changes that have happened with our overall enrollment. How is it sometimes that enrollment might be going down, but staffing might be going the other direction? And I would suggest to you that this accounts for an awful lot of that. And we are not unique by any means in terms of what that sort of correlation can look like.
I have a quick question on that slide. Those ratios 5-to-1 for the special autism classes, is there a recommended ratio? Are we above, below?
Yeah, that's a great question. Christine, would you mind?
So,
Can you flip back to it?
Oh, sorry, yep.
Because it's
right there. Typically,
it's
we try
actually
to
2 to 1, right? In the
keep those
special ed?
ratios low.
I was looking at the top row.
That's classes, 8 classes, 5 kids in each class, but there's 29 teachers for 40 students.
Right, there's the 21
Well, 21 people.
assistants.
21 people are
I
managing
imagine
40
they
students.
just come when they're needed, kind of thing.
So we try to keep the ratios low in those classrooms specifically, but we cannot reach, over 12, 13 is the max of
Okay.
students per class.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just, Kristen, though, just to clarify, that max is set by, and it's an important
Yes,
point.
regulation. This is a regulation that we
Sure.
can't go over. You would have to create another classroom to meet those needs.
When you have 12 in a class, how many teachers are in that class? Is it still just 1 teacher in the classroom?
One teacher, and then we look at the educational assistants based on numbers there. So that's where you see the
So-
educational assistants come in.
So the EAs increase as the student class size increases. The
Yes,
educational
so-
assistants increase in number as the students increase in number in the classroom.
Yes, yeah. And some students also require one-to-one aids. That would be falling into that category as well. Sorry.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And maybe just the final comment, then forgive me for not stating this, it's probably the obvious to many, but if we didn't have these programs, for example, pick any one, if we didn't have a life skills program, second to the bottom, life skills, middle school, high school, 2 classrooms right now, 13 students. If a district doesn't have those programs and those needs are identified, there's a legal obligation to make sure that there's the appropriate program, and in that particular case, the students would likely have to receive their education out of district. And that's where you start to see the very high numbers of out-of-district education costs. And they are large numbers, there's no question about this. So I just want to be clear, we've not embarked upon this as a financial measure or response alone. We think it is best to educate all students to the degree we can here in our classrooms, where we can. But if we can't, or if we don't have the program, that's when students go out of district.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question real quick? Dr. Brand, what's the average price tag on one student that has to go out of district?
That's a great question, but it's a complicated answer. And I think that it's something that we've talked about. I think if there's value in this slide, the expansion of this slide could model or profile that. In other words, how much might it cost to run the STRIDES program with our in-district resources? And if we didn't have that in place, what would we be talking about for out-of-district tuition costs? Those tuition costs can range, it's a great question. I don't have an average number, but that can start at probably 50,000.
50 to 60,000.
Upwards of 200, 250 or more thousand. It depends on the child's needs. And so I think it's a complement we could add to this picture to try and put it into greater context. I don't have that here for you tonight, but.
And I'm not advocating that these students should be educated out of district, but just for my own sake, understanding what the cost would be of all these students going out of district versus the cost you're putting in to educate them all in district would help make it clear to me what the benefit is.
Yeah.
Other than the education and all the intangibles that you articulate, purely from a dollars and cents point of view.
And we can calculate that, but I can tell you unequivocally, from a financial standpoint, Paul uses this term a lot, this is a cost avoidance measure. There is no question that even with the personnel that we have, through the employ of Wilmington Public Schools, if we did not have these programs and we did not have these staff and these students were all attending school out of district, there is no question that number would be far in excess of what the personnel costs are for these programs. But
Thank you.
If I may, just as a quick example, so if we had a program where we had a student was out of district at $120,000 tuition, and then on top of that, there's transportation expenses to maybe $30,000. But if we extrapolate that, because the one student, that's not the avoidance, it's 6 students in this example. So if we had 6 students at $120,000, that would be an out-of-district cost of over $700,000. Add to that transportation, which could be close to $160,000, $170,000. So the cost of the out-of-district program could be $800,000 to $900,000. In staffing, keeping those students in district, we're just talking about for the 6 students, we'd have 1 teacher, 2 ed assistants as an example. That's about $150,000, $160,000. So when you look at, potentially $800,000 cost out of district, I'm rounding these $200,000 staffing costs. There's a cost avoidance of about $600,000 in that example. So that's part of what we kind of go through.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
just a quick recap where we started the year back in December and where we now land before this committee with some adjustments. Our first pass, which is not at all outside of the norm, we take all of the respective requests from our school and district leaders, roll those together, make some tough decisions, and that first pass back in December for what we call the preliminary budget rolled up to 5.32% increase. A lot of numbers and data on here, but just you have this again in your packet, in your memo. That represented just a slightly more than $2.6 million change from fiscal year 25, or this year. We met with the town manager shortly thereafter, before the winter break, and understood the request from his perspective to try and deliver a budget, our department's budget, at 4%. And so our team went back to take a look at our preliminary budget. Where could we make some adjustments to push that number down and align with that 4.0%? And we did just that. This slide captures personnel changes that we reduced by just a little bit over $230,000 from that preliminary budget, and non-salary changes of approximately $420,000. That meant some reductions of staff that we had otherwise identified, that we felt would be helpful, but realized that we couldn't do everything. We wanted to certainly bring that budget into a place that could be supported by the town. And then we have a number of non-salary changes here. I won't go through all of them, but we just took a closer look at what the requests were, made deferments where we could, see some efficiencies and so on. So that was the work that captures our reduction and adjustments from going from the preliminary budget in December to the recommended budget in January and into the public hearing. Obviously, enrollment is a big driver of any school district's operations, or at least it should be, in terms of what are the staffing needs of the district, and how do we adjust with that. These next few slides are typical of what members of the committee and the community have seen before from Paul and his office's work. This first slide, October 1st, as many of you know, is a key number, or sorry, a key date. And October 1st, for those that maybe not know, that's the date of capture, if you will, from the Department of Education. If you go on the Department of Ed's website and see enrollment for a district, October 1st is the date that's selected. So this reflects our enrollment as of October 1st, and in district we had 2,817 students.
I'm sorry, can you go back?
Yeah.
So we have 56 students currently that go out of district?
As of October 1st, we did.
Is that a pretty steady state?
It It has been for the
next-
last
next
few
slide will
years.
show
Oh.
By year.
Oh, I can't read that. I'm gonna trust whatever you tell me, Dr. But I'm not gonna be able to read that.
It's one of the last pages in the book.
Is it? Okay, thank you.
So 56, yeah, it has hovered, but it was upwards, it has been up to 80 and on the doorstep of 90 in the past. Granted, with a larger overall enrollment, but, so you can see the 10-year, and this is the work that Paul does, 10-year enrollment history, 5-year projections. So our overall enrollment has grown since last year and continues to is projected to grow. These projections are based upon a cohort survival methodology. Paul can explain that, or I can explain that more if you'd like, but it's the calculation that's used to project forward based upon where we've been in the past. This has obviously been a point of some discussion here in the district with this committee and others around the retention rate of students from 8th to 9th grade. This has been, certainly we've had a downward trend like many other communities. We've talked about this in the past, but I thought I would share a bit of an update here for the committee on what this looks like at WHS is obviously Wilmington High School. In 24-25, the current school year, as of last week, it's my understanding we had 6 students return to Wilmington High School from Shawshene Valley Tech High School. We had 12 students return from other high schools, so that other, largely private, but not necessarily exclusively. And then the 27 in the green, consider those as new to Wilmington, students of high school age. Last year, we had 20 students return from Shawshene Valley Tech, 9 students returning from other high schools, and 23 new to Wilmington. And then going back a couple of years, you can see the numbers there, 10 students, 6 and 29. But the highlight there is that the retention rate is going up. I talked about this with our school committee, the retention rate from 8th to 9th grade. How many students are we retaining? And that number is absolutely on an upward trend, which I thought the committee would be interested in certainly hearing. Paul's going to take the personnel slide overview here.
Thank you. So our FY25 budgeted FTEs were 488.15 FTEs. Prior to the start of the school year, we had to add a couple of FTEs. One, we had a student move into the district that required an educational assistant, so we have to man that. And then we had an influx of English language learners that came in, and staffing-wise, we needed to add a teacher there. So then during the FY26 budget process, we had a staff increase and a staff reduction due to enrollment. We have contractual obligations, or guidelines, if you will, so that netted to 0. We had some educational positions that were either unfilled or students aged out, so we reduced 4 positions there. We added 4 educational assistants for our STRIDES program that we talked about before, our artistic program. We had a couple of teacher reductions, and they were mainly vacancies that we're not going to fill. We increased a speech language teacher at one of our schools of 0.4. And as the superintendent mentioned, we had to add a STRIDES classroom at one of our elementary schools, which included 1 additional teacher, and 2 of those 4 educational assistants are related to that program as well. So given that, we have in this budget 489.55 FTEs.
And salary.
From a salary standpoint, our FY25 budget, we had salaries about $39.2 million. As the superintendent mentioned, about 80% of our budget is salary. And through the process of the through the budgeting process, we have step and lane change increases of a little over $540,000. We have new positions, salary changes, replacements, position reductions, netting about almost $1,290,000. And then longevity, part of our, a lot of our collective bargaining agreements are longevity payments. and that increased about a little less than $10,000. So the total of that is $1,845,126, bringing our FY26 salary budget to $41,068,149, or about a 4.7% increase budget to budget.
Paul, what was the contractual increase for the educators?
We are in the process of negotiating with 4 units as we speak. Teachers, educational assistants, administrative assistants, and nurses.
So so this year, they were due for an increase. What was last year's increase?
So last year, I believe it was, bear with me 1 second. Okay,
Yeah, it's like
so in this
3 or
current-
3.5
Yeah,
or
3 and
something?
3.25, something like that.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
This current school year, all of our contracts are in place.
Okay.
They all expire either June 30th or I think it's July 31st. So that's what we're in the process of negotiating.
Okay,
Can I follow up on that?
sure.
So is it the school department / school committee's intention to fund those contracts once they are negotiated with the budget that you're recommending here? Or do you think you'll be coming back for additional allocations?
I think right now our intent is to fund it within the budget we have.
Thank you.
Non-salary.
Non-salary changes, as Superintendent spoke a little earlier, there's a lot of pressure on services and district tuition costs and transportation costs. So this is a highlight of some of the larger areas where we had budget increases. So our FY25 budget was about $10.2 million of non-salary. We have an increase in transportation, general education, and athletic, about $72,000. We have a 3-year yellow bus contract with 2 additional 1-year options. FY26 would be the 3rd year of that. I'm going to call it a 5-year contract, and it's about a 5% increase. And hearing what other districts are getting for as they go out to bid, we're in pretty good shape there right now. Out-of-district tuition's about an $185,000 increase. This has to do with many tuitions get set at the state level, anywhere between 4 to 6% increases out-of-district placements. And it's also a factor of, do students move from one placement to a different placement? Do some students drop off from the prior year, and do students be added to the out-of-district tuition pool of students? Out-of-district transportation costs are up significantly.
What's driving that?
We are part of the SEAM Collaborative, and they negotiate a transportation contract for, I think there's 13, it was 13 districts, and now there's 14. So we're all part of this collaborative that helps with out-of-district transportation, not only to SEAM Collaborative, but to any other out-of-district school. There hadn't been an increase in that contract since, I think, the 16-17 school year. So it had to be re-upped, if you will, for FY25, and there were significant increases. Some of the reasoning, rationale, I think, are...
It hasn't changed in 8 years. We all
Yeah,
know,
well,
we all know what's
that-
happened in the last 8
Yeah,
years.
that's part of it, but in addition to that, there's other factors, change in laws, other industry factors, paid time off, sick time, parental leave, and increased vehicle and driver costs that all transportation companies now have to
That's just an
adhere
increase,
to.
that's not the total.
So that's a very big increase to our budget.
So I had asked Paul a question about this, and thank you very much for the responses you provided. But to kind of follow up on and maybe help answer some of Chris's question there, I have a chart here that the vans for out of district in FY25 increased 35%, FY26 another 20%. Wheelchair vans increased the cost at 53% in 25 and 15.9% in 26. Minibuses 40% and 15%, and Monitors for those were 40% and 15%. So I found those very eye-opening when I saw the numbers.
As did we.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did make some other changes. Textbooks, library supplies, again, this is budget to budget, reduced about a little over $11,000. Furniture and equipment reduced a little less than $20,000. Part of the rationale for that was in our capital plan, we have a request for furniture, about $50,000, I think, for the 5-year plan, just to start to replace some of the furniture in some of the older schools that we haven't really had a plan to replace furniture, and focusing mainly on the schools that are not part of the MSBA project. Circuit breaker, there's a large increase there. As the superintendent mentioned, circuit breaker is a state funds that are allocated to districts based on out-of-district tuition costs and some in-district tuition costs and some transportation costs. And there's a floor, the way it works. So if you, I'm going to try to give you an example, maybe it helps. So if we have an out-of-district placement of $100,000, anything over 4 times a per pupil rate becomes reimbursable to all districts. So if we say the per pupil rate's $10,000, I'm making this up, 4 times that's 40,000. So anything over 40,000, districts are allowed to get get a circuit breaker refund, not refund, a payment, if you will. So that would be 60,000. By regulation, it's supposed to be 75% payment based on that 60,000. The last couple of years, it has been about 75%, but there were years that it was as low as the low 40%, based on, the state balancing their budget as well. So I mentioned in one of the school committee meetings that we receive these payments from the state quarterly, and you're allowed to carry over from year 1 to year 2. Whatever you receive in one fiscal year, you have to charge tuitions to that amount either in that current fiscal year or the next fiscal year. So what we've always tried to do is to keep as much of the current year circuit breaker payments to roll over to the next year to help us in case there's any students that move in from other districts, or there's some unanticipated special ed costs, so we don't have to go back to the town requesting money. So in the budget, you see there's a circuit breaker offset. So we increased that offset by a little less than $290,000, and I'm comfortable doing that. Again, that helps us. We can charge some transportation, out-of-district transportation costs there as well, but we're comfortable. So we increased that circuit breaker offset by $287,000. Everyone's eyes glazed over on that?
Go to the next.
Maintenance and repairs, reduction of about $12,000. Most of that is we had a couple of stage curtain repairs last fiscal year that were completed. Electricity, we moved some of our electricity costs to our revolving accounts, $20,000, and we had a reduction of about a little less than $61,000 in professional development. Not just slashing something, but we spent a lot of time going through all the professional development, both in district and with the schools, so we made that reduction. And then other changes, about $1,700. So the total non-salary increase is $133,000, or 1.3% over last year's budget. So in summary, our FY25 budget is $49.4 million. FY26, we're requesting 51.4, or almost $2 million increase, or 4%. And the breakdown is what we talked about earlier.
Just as we did with the school committee, shine a bit of a light on the fact that there are always great and creative ideas. I'm sure this holds true for any department here in town, and school department is no exception. These just represent some of the recommendations that came forth through the budget process from some of our school or district leaders, and there's always more that could be done, of course. They're reflected here to just give you a spotlight and just what some of those were, but at the end I felt that they couldn't be advanced as part of this budget plan, unfortunately. It doesn't take away from the merits of what were being proposed, but just with the limitations, obviously, of resources, they weren't put forward at this time. Capital request is covered here, a lot more numbers, but Paul, you just want to speak to this briefly?
Yeah, so in the book, binder that you have our capital requests in FY '26 requesting $631,000. Various items there, Chromebook replacements, an elementary projector replacement project. Minivans we broke up, so we have minivan 6, about $100,000. Middle school laptop and desktop replacements. The same at the north and the west, the laptop replacements. We have a couple of security camera improvement projects, one at the middle school, one at the high school. We added some furniture and whiteboard replacements, what I mentioned before, that we're trying to get in the process of replacing some of our old and obsolete furniture. And then we have some security improvements, about $60,000 that requested in FY '26. So the total is $631,000. And you can see what are the other 4 years in this 5-year plan.
Madam Chair, question, maybe for the group and then potentially input. Wearing my Andy hat, he would ask what of this is variable and what of it is fixed or discretionary, non-discretionary. On one of the previous slides, we saw 1% of the budget is this stuff, right? And it's really just the salary, of which was 4.7% increase. You said there was a number, 3.3 or something, which was contractually obligated as a raise, and you're still negotiating with 4 groups, something along those lines. I guess my point being, this is 1% of the budget. I think this is great information, but I think the real focus, right, was it's the 4.7% increase. In terms of if we're gonna, so I think that is relevant in that this is really, this is very informational and there's a lot here, but I think really it's more about the outstanding negotiation, right?
Right.
I think that's what we're probably focusing on.
So historically, the way probably most of us, our first thought on the budget was, what was the total percentage you've gone up, and what was the contractual increase for that year? So if those two numbers are very close to one another, then there's a degree of confidence in the budget. If it's significantly different, then that's when you really, your attention is alerted. But I think that's what you're saying, right? Yeah.
And as far as the capital requests go, these all have to be individually voted on at town meeting.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
it's
Okay.
important that they have to include this.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I could see,
Can I ask a question?
sure.
Are you guys done, or should we?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment on this, that if I could quickly, that this is reflective of our longer, or 5-year needs, that is not the consideration of a new school coming online. Should a new school be, hopefully, approved in September, there will be corresponding adjustments once that comes into clear focus around technology specifically, but this is making an assumption that that building is not online, that things will change. I just wanted to draw attention to that. But there's 2 last slides, but we've really touched upon everything, so we can happily go to questions in the interest of your time.
On the $1.8 million you have in grants, which might be funding teachers' positions, whatever the case may be, do you know at this point that since we voted down the MBTA, whether any of these grants are in jeopardy?
Most of our grants, so that amount that you mentioned is a combination of grants, and there's some revolving in there, but, so this year in FY '25, we had about $1.4 million in grants. This is the actual grants that we have. Most of our grants are federal grants, so we're not, the MBTA shouldn't impact those. Some of the other, there's a couple that we have that are state grants that we have for this year, which shouldn't be impacted, because I think we have till the end, for a while. So, but most all of our grants are federal. In the state ones, some of them that we requested this year, a couple of them are some that we never had before. So it allows us to do a little bit curriculum work and things like that. But for the most part, in even some of the other state grants, they didn't have, in the grant documentation, DESI, there was phraseology that, as long as you, in order to apply, you have to adhere to all Mass General laws, and the MBTA community is part of that. But we don't see that being, even if we lost those, we don't see big impact, unless the federal grants for some reason got,
Right,
that's a
the
different
federal
animal.
grants are iffy at this point,
I
too.
wouldn't take any comfort in that.
That's back to the finance committee.
So my comment is one that it comes up every year regarding grants. First of all, the school department deserves a huge amount of credit for the effort that is put into securing the total of grants that we receive every year. And that is not left unnoticed by the Finance Committee. But of course, there's a concern when you see teachers or ed assistants or any kind of employment coming through those grants. What happens when that grant drops off? Because now you've created a spot for an individual, and it's difficult to eliminate that spot because they're doing a job for you. But if you hadn't received that grant, you may not have had that person on board. So that's where I always get hung up on this. Grateful that you're so successful in securing these grants for our community, but concerned that it leads us down a path of increased costs eventually. So I know you can't necessarily come up with an answer for that, but that is a concern that I've had, and apparently a couple of other people here are acknowledging as well.
If I may, and you're right on that. And if you remember the ESSER grants, way back when, we did, well, I won't say create, but we hired a bunch of new positions and we ran them through the ESSER grants. And when the ESSER grants dried up or were expired, we actually brought some of those people into the local budget. This was a few years ago. In other positions, we just didn't bring them back in because we knew we just couldn't support it in the school system. Most of the staff that are charged to grants are more on the federal grant side. There are a couple that are state grants, and I think some of those we'd have to make a decision and possibly not bring them into the local budget if we couldn't, if we in the town can't support it.
But I'll ask, there is an example in here, we didn't touch upon this, but one of the positions that was recommended that is not currently funded is a special education coach, I think is what we refer to it as. That those programs I was talking about earlier, the intensity of those programs, the continued challenges that are associated with some of those, we recognize that some additional support for our educators in those programs could be helpful. It was a position that ultimately didn't make it to this FY26 budget plan, but with the school committee, we discussed the fact that there is a grant that's sitting out there that we are going to aggressively explore to see if that might be a possibility to bring that position on board. But what I would say to the very good question is, I think that pursuing grants is a great opportunity for a district to bring on board positions, but in our case, each one should be evaluated for its merits to see whether or not, if that grant expires, it should at all continue. Through the pandemic, we brought on board family engagement specialists. Through grant funding, those grants supported those positions with our district for a couple of years. Those are brand new positions for our district. We were, like others, trying to figure out which pathway forward would be best. We didn't know what these positions exactly would look like, but we recognized that they could bring undoubtedly assistance during the, sort of the post-pandemic time periods. We learned that they're invaluable, we believe. And I know I speak for others around what they've been able to bring to our district. And so when those grants expired, we had to have that conversation both internally first and then with the school committee to say, look, we believe that they're important. We think that they can continue to play a role, and so they are in our budget now. But I would hope that we are not bringing on board grants just to automatically make an assumption that if those grants expire, they're automatically rolled in. I think that would not be a healthy fiscal way to approach sort of all of that, so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have one other question. So lately, there's a lot of concern around security measures in buildings. And I noticed that you have two schools, the high school and the middle school, are going to get security camera upgrades or replacements. And then there's security improvements for facilities. I'm not sure what facilities that is referring to, but I don't see any extending capital for security, like in the next 5 years. And I'm just wondering why, because I know that some of our older schools do not have the appropriate security. And I just don't even know how we justify that. So can you make me feel better about this?
Yeah, Ken, do you want to, and as Ken's coming up, Ken works closely with us on all of this, so I'm not just deferring to Ken, but there's a couple of things at play here, and that's another example. I'll just go back to where a couple of years, well, time's passing quickly, more than that, we actually pursued some grant funding in partnership with the police to bring on board external lock improvements for the middle school. So those are also avenues that we pursue. Ken works hard from not just the technology standpoint, but he's been a great support in overall safety and security planning. I'll let him speak a little bit more to this.
Sure. So the funding that we're requesting in this year's capital budget, or next year's capital budget for security improvement, includes door lock upgrades for some of our elementary schools, as well as security blinds for our hallway windows to allow that in a lockdown procedure, the teacher can quickly drop a screen that would block a window, in addition having the door locked so that an intruder would not be able to see in who's in the room and be able to protect them more. We have security camera updates for the high school and middle school. There's also in the next year a request to do elementary school camera upgrades. We kind of pushed that off a little to see where the building project goes so we can adjust the scope of that project accordingly with that. There's also security camera replacements out in future years when we feel those cameras are coming due for replacement. So the security cameras for next year and the elementaries for the following year are additional cameras that we're adding.
Okay, so the facilities, is that where you're mentioning, is that what you're referring to?
That's the door locks and the window blinds.
Okay, and
That's
those
security
door
concerns.
locks are the ones that the fire department has approved, right?
Yeah, these are door lock handles that will allow the teacher to lock the door from the inside without having to go out in the hall and use a key.
Okay. And all of our elementary schools will get them?
This is for this project because of the coming building project. This is for the west side elementary schools.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you very
Yep.
much.
We're paying a lot of attention, just to hopefully make you feel better. Where there's been a lot of focus on safety and security with the partnership with the police and fire department. It's been a source of a lot of time and attention. So you should feel good that we're attending to that.
Okay, good.
And we did just complete a safety audit, a district safety audit that we spoke with the school committee about and for the community that was a great move to try and assess our overall buildings through a third party. And again, information that's been shared with police and fire as we continue our partnership with them moving forward. So.
Quick question, Paul, my question every year. How much is in the CARES revolving account?
So the CARES revolving account had a, bear with me, just happen to have it here. At the end of FY '24, there was about $1.3 million in that. As of the beginning of December, it was about $856,000. And it's not, so the tuition costs, I mean, the program is just tremendously popular. So our tuition costs really haven't changed. The last time we changed the tuition costs was in FY '21. So we really haven't changed the price we charge families, other than it changed a little bit in FY '24, just because we changed school hours then, and it had an impact on, some schools started earlier, so it threw some things off, some got out later, and so forth. But I think it's just the popularity of that program, and we still try to keep the ratios of 10-to-1 students to staff members and so forth. But yeah, we haven't, the tuition's been, it's a pretty good deal for what they get.
Is there any way to use some of this money for security upgrades instead of,
Yeah,
going further out, kind of
Yeah,
get it back and?
Yeah, any revolving revenue, you have to expense something that's associated with the revenue that you received. So it's a little
Still
bit difficult.
protecting the CARES kids.
Yeah, I mean, well, for instance, you saw in the presentation that we moved some electricity to revolving, so that was the CARES. That was additional electricity, because we already have electricity charged to CARES. You can only do so much, you can't go overboard there, so we do that. We charge part of a technician from IT to the CARES department as well. So we look for those opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she brought up an excellent point. At least in the schools, so there's the North, and is there another school that's Shawsheen? So at least in those schools, if you can justify the additional safety measures, it would take some of the funds away from the other schools. It would make more funds available for the other schools, so that we could get that accomplished faster. And the goal is to secure the schools, so.
There's a creative way, I mean.
We'll let you know. Okay, thank you. Oh, we're at the end of the presentation?
We are, yes.
Wow. Okay. So when I was reviewing the budget, one of the things that I noticed was, and this is just a comment, most of the activity is revolving around two areas. One is ed assistance, and the other one is special education. So general education doesn't seem to be seeing a lot of movement in staff or any other needs. But those two seem to be driving this budget considerably. I totally support trying to educate children in-house rather than doing the out-of-district. And I appreciate the benefit in so many ways, not just financially, to that. But it's hard, like if you look at this budget, it just looks like, when is this ever going to stop? Like, at what point are we going to get to a point where we're basically covering everything we should be covering? But it seems to grow every year.
I think that the reality that we are contending with, not unlike any other district, is, we've talked about this before, is the challenges that many of our students bring. And we certainly carefully consider what the needs are for support. We do not, for the committee, we carefully calculate what those needs are. We try and adjust accordingly if students phase out of programs. Sometimes students move into programs. So we're mindful of that. I'm mindful of that. We've talked about this obviously extensively, and I think just for the committee to know that we make these decisions certainly not whimsically. We do this based upon what we feel is best to serve the students, and unfortunately, it continues to be a volatile and challenging time for a lot of students and a lot of programs and a lot of schools, and this is not just Wilmington, this is far and wide. Not sure, understand the question respectfully, sort of when does it end? But I think that we need to continue, as we do, to carefully monitor what those staffing needs are. If we can make adjustments, and that includes reductions, we have, over time, we've talked about this and tried to showcase that before. But I do understand the concern.
And it's not to insinuate that we shouldn't be providing these services. But it's just from a financial standpoint, you look at it and you say, oh, it's going up again this year. There's more staff needed this year. And by stopping, I just meant kind of slowing down, like, you know. So one other question, the effects of COVID on students. You had mentioned you were able to bring in specialists to help us get over that point. Where do you see the temperature of that group of students that had difficulties coming back from the COVID break? Where do you see that? Have they been able to get back on track? Are they still feeling left behind?
I'll start, but Christine, do you want to maybe speak to Christine Elliott for the teaching and learning? Because I think there's two facets of this. There's obviously the academic element, right, for the learning component, and then there's the social and emotional well-being component too, both of which have obviously been talked an awful lot about post-pandemic. Christine, Assistant Superintendent for Administration Finance, or that's Paul.
Nope, not that. Definitely
works
not
very, very closely with our teachers and our school leaders, looking carefully at data, student data, assessment data across multiple grade levels. I'll turn it over to her to comment.
So I think it's difficult to pinpoint the impact on any particular grade because each student was impacted, each grade span was impacted differently depending on where they were, what grade they were in, or were they even in school yet at that time. However, we're looking, our benchmark, if you will, is always looking back to 2019 and how did our students perform in 2019, which was just your typical school year, and trying to see if we are, reaching those standardized scores from 2019. We're not there yet at many grade levels, but we are seeing a trend in the right direction. It was definitely, I'd say it's an uphill battle because these kids need to gain far more than a year's worth of growth in a year in order to close that gap. And that takes time. And then, as Dr. Brand mentioned, you add the social emotional needs that we've seen as a result of the pandemic increase for many of our students, which makes reaching academic goals that much more challenging. We're on the right track. We've provided, I think we've done a really nice job in the district providing really intensive intervention to fill the gaps for those students who, for all of our students who are identified as needing some additional support and really looking at those supports, looking at the intervention we're providing. Is it actually closing the gap or is it just going through the motions and really reflecting? We're constantly looking at assessment data and analyzing it and making adjustments. So we're on the right track.
Great. Thank you very much. And Scott.
I only have one and then I have a comment. But so you talked about the Strides program and adding a Strides classroom. Having 6 elementary schools, does that make it challenging for the Strides program? And if we have consolidation, like if we consolidate 3 into 1 on the north side, could there be a chance that you don't have to add an additional classroom at times because now you have everyone in the same school?
I think that I'll let Christine, if she wants to touch base or add to this, but I would say this: that operating these programs across 6 elementary schools, and so let's just separate it into the 2 halves. I know we don't want to talk about 2 halves, but the pre-K to 5. If we had these programs under one roof, there would be far greater benefits to come from that for a whole host of reasons. Not only the continuity of staffing, the ability to focus professional development and support in that one building. But yes, at times, I don't want to go on record to say absolutely will it reduce the numbers, but it all depends upon the number of students in each grade and each age band, right? But The benefits, we truly believe, would be considerable to be operating, say, a stages program under one roof. We also think that, one of the challenges we have in some of these programs is the turnover of staff. These are difficult jobs, often a lot of them. And sometimes we are thin on that support piece because we are stretched over, multiple elementary schools. We think that there'll be just a lot of benefits. Christine, I don't know if you want to, you don't have to. Okay, all right. Okay.
So isn't it true, though, to that point, state regulations allow us to have an in-district class with a 3-year age span?
Correct.
And we don't have elementary schools that have 3-year age spans. So by definition, these
Right.
programs have to be, could get larger. I mean, we couldn't do them all in one program.
No.
Because there are way too many students, but we could take 3 and turn them into
Right.
2 perhaps, depending on the numbers and the intensity and
Yep.
of the needs of the students and the size of the space available, et cetera. I'm just talking about mathematically and from a regulation standpoint. You could do that and allow a student to be with a teacher for 3 years as opposed to 2 years. Allow a student to be in the same, these students particularly, in the same environment for 6 years as opposed to 3 different environments, which can significantly impact these students most significantly. For example, students with autism, change is not their strength. It's always a challenge for them, right? So changing schools can cause some challenges and cause them to spend more time at the beginning of the year adjusting to their new situation as opposed to being able to address the curriculum. So it seems to me that in the area of special education, there's opportunity to look at it through a different lens, perhaps, using the state regulations as your guide as opposed to the physical constraints of your buildings, which is your guide now, right? Okay. Thank you. I want to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any comments or questions?
One of the I'm just.
You said
I said one question, one comment.
Question and a comment, he only asked a
you
question.
first.
Yeah.
Scott, you have all the time you want.
I just want to get on my soapbox for a minute. Chapter 70 funding. I've talked to both of you about it before, but we have 2 superintendents here, a number of school committee members, town manager. For anyone at home who doesn't understand it, Chapter 70 funding, if it is increasing at a lower rate than our school budget is increasing, the town has to pick up more of the school budget every year. And that's been happening for a long, long time. Chapter 70 funding at a state level over the last 4 years increased 4.2%, 9%, 9.9%, and 4.7%. The State House specifically cited special education programming and transportation costs and out-of-district education costs for reasons why they had to increase the Chapter 70 funding so much. Wilmington, over those years, got 0.7% increase, a 1.5, a 1.5, and a 2.5% increase. Shawshene Tech got a 0.6%, 1.2, 1.2, and 2% increase. Those are basically due to minimum. We get the minimum increase for most years. The governor's budget has recommended $30 of an increase for each year for the last 4 years. They've upped it to $75 this year. In 2023, the State House increased that to $60. So they upped what the governor proposed. 2024, they went to $60. In 2025, they went to $104 per student, which was a huge jump over what the governor proposed. The governor has now dropped it back down to $75. For anyone who is listening, encourage our state legislatures to increase what towns like Wilmington get for Chapter 70 funding. We keep on losing ground every single year, and we need a boost for it. That was it.
Very good. This side, anybody? No? Okay, well, I guess, I'm so sorry. Mr. Slagle? Yes, please.
Thank you very much, members of the committee. I really appreciate the chance to speak real quick. I just wanted to say how much I appreciated the process of this budget, working with Glenn and Paul. I will say I felt like I barely met them before we started sitting down and talking budget numbers last summer. This was a much more collaborative process than I've dealt with in the past. So I want to let the members of the committee, both the school committee and the finance committee, know not every town does this. Not every town has a superintendent that's willing to work with the town manager and collectively talk about budget issues. Sometimes there's that divide, but I want to credit the administration at the school for coming and sitting down and proactively talking to me about it, and for engaging early on in meetings that I think led to us getting to the budget that we had. And I just wanted to say that out loud, that I really appreciated the process.
And I hope going forward, the school committee, that's not lost on the school committee when they do their search for the new superintendent.
Yes. If you'd like to make a comment, you're limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and
thank you. It's Kevin
residence.
McDonald. I'd like to request an exemption since this is the largest portion of our budget, the department that is requiring the most amount of money, and to limit somebody to 3 minutes for $51,423,526.
You're limited to
is
3
a little
minutes,
bit
Mr.
unreasonable.
McDonald, and that's it. Take it or leave it.
Okay. Before I make my comments or questions, could I just ask that a slide be put up showing the new positions that are going to be added?
I don't know if you have a slide. You do not have a
just
slide.
saw
He
it.
doesn't have a slide handy for that.
Well, he's asking for $1,289,764 for new positions. And I did see a slide that showed an increase in positions.
I don't think that's correct. No.
He showed positions he'd like.
It was actually in green. It's actually in green, I'm
Wasn't
sure.
that the slide that you showed, that positions you'd like to have, but you didn't actually put in the budget?
Right.
There was a slide on that,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so the new positions are, call it 1.3 million. How many new positions are there that are totaling that amount?
Ms. McDonald, those were not items that were contained in the budget.
Okay, I must have been seeing things then.
No, you
Okay.
didn't. You weren't seeing things. You did see a list, but those are things that were asked for in the beginning of the budget process, and those are items that did not make the cut. So
yeah.
that number doesn't exist right now.
Okay, I want to give you my opinion on the fact that grants are being cut off, and there was a coordinator, an intervention coordinator between families and the school department, but yet he still wants to keep that position. It's my belief that our guidance counselors should have the sociology and psychology background to be able to perform intervention, thus being called guidance teachers. So I would hope this board would vote down that aspect of this budget. You asked the question, where is the end to this? Why is it keep going up? The reason why it keeps going up and why there's no end is because this board doesn't take the responsibility to drill down and look into things a little deeper than that. With regard to the potential school, I was going to read something to you. Bait and switch tactics are often considered to be a type of fraud and therefore is illegal. Bait and switch scams can fall under a number of violations, from breach of contract to false advertising. And I read this because you had a special town meeting at the Shriner Center looking for an early education school. But then that turns into this monster $250 million school, which is 3 times as much as a high school cost. And I talked to people in town that actually work in that building, and people that tell me that the North Intermediate, which is the school that you want to knock down, is probably one of our best schools in the entire town.
Thank you
And-
very
and
much,
for
Ms.
that-
McDonald. Unfortunately, your time is up. But
Okay,
we
I'll tell you what.
appreciate your thoughts.
Why don't
Thank
you Why don't you
Have a
ask
good
him like
evening.
if he had a puppy in the first
Thank you
grade and
very
what his
much.
favorite crayon
So I'd like
was?
to thank the Wilmington Public Schools for coming out tonight.
Just one concluding thought, if I may.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to bring attention to my colleague on my left, your right, Mr. Ruggiero. I know he's going to kill me for this later, but as many of you know, Paul's recently announced his decision to retire in the fall of 2025.
Amen.
After over 16 years of dedicated service to the town of Wilmington and the Wilmington Public Schools. I know that Paul has brought an incredible level of professionalism, commitment, and collaboration and collegiality to his work both in our department and across this community. What I also know and have learned quickly is that his financial stewardship has served as the foundation of maintaining the operation of our school district in the black all of these years. His skill set, honesty, and commitment to his work, I know, have allowed him to be trusted by many who served in the elected seats both here this evening and those before you, as well as our school committee. And I want to take this opportunity to thank him as this is his last official budget that he will present. So with that, thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Now, I'll just say that I've truly enjoyed my time here in Wilmington. I'm not going anywhere right now, but I've appreciated all the questions and the back and forth with the Finance Committee over the years. And I'm proud of the work we've done in the school system and for the town of Wilmington. So again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you both,
you
and
both
thank
for
you
the
to the school
input tonight.
committee for coming out tonight. Thank you. Is the tech here? Oh.
Thank you. She's gonna be five.
Thank you, thanks for coming, appreciate it.
I'm still confused about that.
Thank you.
Tony, how are you?
There was a whole army here for the public schools. You're all alone? I'm by myself. Oh, my goodness.
I just wanted to say thank you.
We're probably still out, man.
I think I was walking out on you.
I appreciate that. Where's our Super Bowl bling?
I don't have any, so track it down, I'll let you know.
Would now like to welcome the Shawshene Tech School, Tony McIntosh, Superintendent.
Just give me 1 second to settle
Take your
in here.
time.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share some highlights of the FY26 Shawshene Valley Technical High School budget with you. My name is Tony McIntosh, and I'm the Superintendent Director at Shawshene Valley Technical High School. The Shawshene Valley Regional Vocational Technical School District Committee held a public hearing for the FY26 budget on February 25th, 2025, and voted unanimously to approve the budget that was shared with all of our sending communities. The FY26 budget incorporates a number of funding sources, including the use of excess and deficiency funds, transportation revolving funds, grant funding, and program-specific revolving funds. While we have offset the costs in the budget using a combination of approaches, we're proud to bring forward a budget with an overall increase of $1,131,216 over our FY25 budget request. A lot has happened at Shawshene Valley Technical School since the last time we presented before this committee. In the spring of 2024, we established a salary scale for all of our administrators and established pay ranges for all of our non-union employees. This has helped us to create predictability in our salary budgeting and address some long-standing concerns among these employees. In January of 2025, the district settled 3 collective bargaining agreements with the units represented by the Shawshene Teachers Association, or the STA. These 3-year agreements are in place for our teachers, paraprofessionals, education technology staff, and maintenance staff. Our FY26 budget includes these updated salaries, as well as salaries for all administrative and non-union employees. We currently have 2 outstanding contracts that need to be settled, our clerical and cafeteria groups. We have budgeted for the anticipated raises for these groups, but need to wait until these contracts are finalized to finalize those numbers. On December 13th, 2024, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA, invited Shawshene Valley Technical High School into the eligibility period. We will begin to complete Module 1 eligibility period beginning on August 1st, 2025. And we will complete this phase of the approval process on or before April 28th, 2026. We are excited about the opportunity that this process could potentially provide for our school, but we're also keenly aware of the impact that this project can have on all of our sending communities. We have made adjustments in the FY26 budget that focus on us postponing some of the facilities and infrastructure capital projects until we have a better understanding of the scope and cost of a potential MSBA project. The FY26 budget also includes a transfer from our excess and deficiency, or E&D fund, into the newly established stabilization fund. Our sending communities voted to establish the stabilization fund during last year's town meetings, and this will mark the first time that we requested to transfer funds into this account. As you review the budget we have shared, please keep in mind that this budget request includes all of the costs associated with operating our school. We do not ask for additional warrant articles to fund capital projects and upgrades, and all of that is included in the increase that we are presenting. We do not cost share building maintenance with our sending communities or participate in any type of town-level health insurance fund. All of those costs are absorbed by us as a district. All of those costs have also been included in this presentation, in this presented budget, excuse me. I'd also like to point out that the required minimum contributions to the regional district for all 5 of our sending communities was increased under the FY26 Chapter 70 funding formula. This equates to an additional $434,737 that our communities are required to fund based on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts budget calculations. This is entirely outside of the control of the Shawshene Valley Technical High School, and we've worked diligently to keep our overall budget increase down by utilizing all of the other resources that are available to us. Thank you. I have the budget book electronically. I don't know if you want me to put it up and walk through it, or...
Does anybody have any specific concerns?
That would be a good idea for transparency.
I do have a couple of specific things that I'll ask
Okay.
about, so.
All right, so Mr. Neville has some questions for you.
Sure.
So as for the budget book,
Yep.
let me go through here. On page 13. And I want to thank you and Jenna for answering. I sent over a number of questions, and I do want to thank you for taking the time to answer those. The FY25 total minimum required contribution, the number at the top there, $20,876,000, that doesn't match what we approved last year. And it doesn't foot to the number on the bottom there. So I actually have 2025 last year's, I brought it. But I have that number at $20,804,919.
20,804.
919.
Okay.
So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that number was in there correctly, and it didn't change.
Okay.
But that number still
Where did-
adds, even though it's, the number
So if
is
you replace the
incorrect.
number with this year's budget, with that, the 20,804,000, then it does add.
Yes.
So that's why I think it's
Yep.
just that number's just in
Okay.
there wrong.
Okay.
That was yeah.
Where did that 20,804,919, did you pull that number from?
The FY25 budget book.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, it's also in this budget book on page 46.
Okay. Thanks.
Is that, if it's
it's 2804,980, yep. Okay. I will look into that. I
Okay,
don't have an
yeah.
answer for you right this
Yeah,
second.
no,
but-
not a
yep.
problem, yeah. If we want to jump to page 37. So this is the operating budget, and it's broken out by different costs on that. And under support services, there is paraprofessionals.
Yep.
And I believe Jenna had sent over a breakout of
Yep.
what paraprofessionals you have. So the line item on this is for 397,722.
Yep.
And according to the numbers that we received, that's for 9 paras,
Yep. That
which
was,
is the same that we had for FY '26.
there actually should be 2 added. If you look at the information that she had sent over, we added
Okay.
2 paras.
Okay.
So that, for whatever reason, that did not carry into the FY '26 FT column. That should be 11.
That should be
Not
11
9.
there,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
All right. And, okay, so basically my question with this is, so we're at 11 for FY '24, we were at 9. FY '25, we were at 9. In FY '26, we're at 11. The costs of that have gone up 70% in 2 years. It was 234,000 in FY '24, and now we're at 397,000.
The pairs organized and negotiated a collective bargaining agreement right around the time of that increase. So
Okay.
this is the second full year of their collective bargaining, so it should, those numbers should line up with the fiscal years that you're describing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that going to continue to go up
No.
at this rate?
No.
Okay. Is this the last year it's going up at that
Yes.
pace?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a lot of initial adjustments and placements, and then we actually staggered it out so that people couldn't go from 0 to the top of the pay scale within 1 year. So there has been some segmented adjustments to that, which should all end at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
What is the overall increase that you arrived at?
The 5.63%?
5.63% is the increase that I have, yeah.
Yeah.
So your overall increase instead of 2.9 is actually 5.63, correct?
If we back out, we offset the transportation costs
Yeah.
differently between the FY '26 budget and the FY '25 budget. Again, that was something that was recommended to our business manager as a best practice through MASBO, Mass Association of School Business Officials, I believe. So we made that again, it wasn't, we weren't trying to hide that. It was just we updated our practice. And, as we went through this, we were looking at the increase from our total last year to the total this year. Mr. Neville had pointed that out, and that was part of the conversation back and forth, that yes, that is a more accurate description of how that changed. But we plan to continue to use the same approach moving forward. This was a year of an adjustment. And we started to utilize those transportation revolving funds to try to offset those costs.
So, no, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
So,
So the committee is,
If the superintendent has his budget electronically, I think it would be in order and for the benefit of the community to have him put it up on the board. And I think that's very orderly.
thank you. So in the future, whenever you come across a situation like that, we always ask department heads if they could just put a footnote
Yep.
so that will alert us that there's a change and we can work through it.
Yeah. Again, it wasn't intentional, and
No, of course
when
not.
it was brought
Yeah.
to our attention, we shared the information, we made the modifications to it, but, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
sorry, Scott.
No, that's all right.
I'm sorry to everybody. Anything else, Mary Ann?
I think just doing some sort of insert into the budget to make everybody acknowledge this for this budget year. Because that's a big deal, the 2.9 versus the 5.6.
So include the information that we had
Exactly.
walked out?
Yep.
Okay.
So to go along with that, the transportation costs were included in your operating budget in years past.
Yes.
So they've since been removed, aside from this like 217,000. But see, I have the number here somewhere.
It was about $500,000 we were using from the transportation revolving, somewhere in that range.
Right, but year to year, so the change from FY '25 to FY '26 for that particular line item
Yep.
has gone down around like 1.5 million because
we
you've
transferred
changed
that
how
out.
you're doing that.
Yep.
But your operating costs are still going up.
Yes.
So the operating costs are going up. I forget what the number, the number I have is about 2.3 million for your operating costs are increasing year over year if you subtract out transportation costs from both years. Again, that's more than you're kind of presenting as this budget, which I have an issue with.
Okay.
Again, I don't think you're trying to hide it, but I don't agree with the way that the budget is presented.
Okay. And again, we're trying to do this for 5 sending communities as well, so we get feedback from the other 4, they want, so we're trying to find a compromise that everybody is comfortable with and is acceptable to all 5 of our sending communities.
Yeah. The transportation aid, the offset that, so you're using it to fund, or to fund the transportation cost, that's the entire amount that you have in your.
In that revolving fund?
In your revolving
Yes,
account.
yes.
And I think we've talked about this last year or the year before. When do you get reimbursed for that from the state? Is that throughout the school year, or do they, I know sometimes offset, like the special education circuit breakers come like the year after a lot of times. Is this run like that, or is this?
It's usually the following summer.
Okay.
And then the other thing that plays into this, because we are a regional school, sometimes that regional transportation percentage changes depending upon what the legislator does versus the governor's number. So we always try to be a little conservative with our estimate of what we're going to get returned. And again, now utilizing that revolving, so when we have that revolving money moving forward, we're going to use that to offset the following year.
Yeah.
It's just this year we're kind of a cycle behind in making that happen.
Right, makes sense. And good thing about the legislature is you said that that's going up to 95% reimbursement.
Allegedly.
Or that's what you're being told, at least.
That's what we're being
told.
Yes, yes.
Much better, yes. Yes.
Yes.
Hopefully that holds true. Your transfer to the capital stabilization fund of $750,000.
Yep.
So that's new this year, was voted in last year. This board didn't agree with it, but the town voted for it. So I appreciate that you're putting money into capital stabilization. I think if you weren't doing it, each town individually should be doing it, because it is a cost that we need to start accounting for. But your transfer of $750,000, looking at your revolving account in your E&D, in years past, anything over 5% would have to get returned to the communities.
That's right. It still does if we go over 5%. Yep. In E&D, yes.
Yep. So your E&D certified for FY '23 is exactly 5% of your FY '24 budget.
No, it's 5% of the 23 budget. It's based on the fiscal year, so 23 gets certified as 5% of the FY '23 budget.
Yeah.
24 gets certified as 5% of the 24
Okay.
budget.
All right, I might have grabbed the wrong year when I was doing the math on it. So that's at exactly 5%.
Yep.
That $750,000 is coming from E&D. So if you didn't have the capital stabilization fund, that $750,000 would be going back to the 5 communities. That's correct?
Only if we go over the 5%. So what we're proposing is to take it out of that 5% that we're allowed to carry.
Right. So, but you're at the 5%.
We are.
So that would be going back.
Well,
If you did not have capital stabilization, that money would go back to the communities.
not unless we went over the 5%. So every year it increases
Mm-hmm.
because it's 5% of whatever your budget increase is. So every year we can add to that
Okay.
a little, I mean, it's not a lot, but a little
Right.
bit. But yes, if we were to go over the 5%, it would be returned to the sending communities.
Okay.
One of the reasons for establishing the stabilization fund, it's twofold. One was long-term capital projects.
Yeah.
Because I believe it was 2 years ago, we came out and asked for about $500,000 for building repair
Right.
that
Yeah,
wasn't
and,
well
the
received.
pool, right?
For the pool, yeah. And the other piece of it was, again, we were anticipating hopefully getting into the MSBA pipeline at some point in time. This year, next year, we are gonna try to, again, transfer some money from that E&D account to potentially build up a pool of funds so that either we, A, don't have to go out to the communities to ask for feasibility study, or when we come out to the communities, it's a reduced amount that we're asking for instead of the full boat, to do that portion of the feasibility study.
Okay. I have questions about the budget as a whole, or comments about the budget as a whole, but if anyone has any other questions about, I don't want to monopolize here.
When do you expect to go out for the feasibility study?
So our official window opens August 1st of this year. The first phase of that is a lot of self-study. What are we currently doing? What do we want to do? We have to look at the enrollment trends and make predictions about what our, they don't call it targeted population, but like what our ideal population is for a new building. We have to establish a building committee. We have to go through all of these things. So then that has to go back for their review and approval. This is probably I'm going to say feasibility would probably be early '27. It may be a little bit sooner than that, but I mean, realistically, looking at all the stuff that they're asking us to do and the timelines that they have, I still think you're a year and a half or 2 years out.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on that? Just, since you brought it up, the issue of a building committee, I just want to encourage you and the school committee to very strongly consider having local member district non-school committee members as part of your school building committee. I think it is essential that that all 5 of your sending districts have an incredible amount of input as early and as often as possible for 2 reasons. One, because I think it will create a better project, however the outcome. And 2, it will add credibility to the process so that if and when you end up coming back to your member communities and saying, so it won't be surprise, it may be a little less so. So I think the makeup of the school building committee is a very important decision that either, I assume the school committee has to make. I don't know how that works in a regional school district, but I'm assuming your school committee makes that decision. So my input, since our 2 representatives aren't here tonight, my input through you to them is that I think, I know Wilmington would be very well served by having representation beyond our member school committee members.
And it, just if I can respond to that, so that was a conversation with our Capital Planning Facilities Committee, and I actually brought that up. I've also shared that with the town managers in our meetings as well, and said, as we move forward with this, I want to, please start thinking about who is a good representative from your community, who is somebody that wants to be involved with this, who is somebody that's going to bring that lens from Wilmington, Billerica, Tewksbury, wherever it might be. So, yeah, we have started to have those conversations. Yep.
My question is a little simpler. How many students have applied? When is your application process?
It closed February 1st.
Okay, and how many students applied from middle school?
Want to say about 9. I don't have the exact number, but it's probably around 90.
90.
About 90, yeah.
And I think our population in that grade was 260? 260. Okay. I also noticed that your population numbers have decreased.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you determine whether a student would be a good fit at the technical school versus a regular high school?
So I believe you're asking about the admissions process. So we have an admissions policy. It's reviewed every year by our school committee, voted on by them. It looks at student attendance. It looks at student grades. It looks at student discipline records. There's an opportunity for student to provide a recommendation from a teacher or a guidance counselor. And then we also do interviews. So every kid that applies, we have staff members that sit down with them and talk to them about, why are you interested in coming here? What programs you want to pursue? The decline in numbers are at both our sophomore and junior class are only about 300 students. So we had a period of time in there where I don't know that we were necessarily doing our due diligence with recruiting and outreach and a lot of those things. We've put a lot of things in place the last couple of years. We brought in 357 freshmen for this year's class. As of last week, we still had 349 of them, so we only lost 8 kids, which has been unheard of for us in the past. Usually it's 20 or 25 students come or go at the beginning of the year. We have almost 540 verified applications for next school year. What I mean by verified is they're not students that live out of district. They're not, they're not students that we can't accept. Those are like validated and legitimate applications. We're going to look at bringing in 360 again for next year's freshman class. So it's going to take us a couple of years to get that bubble, if you will. But again, we're headed towards increasing that enrollment population, getting back closer to that 1350, 1375 number where we should be.
How many Wilmington students left the tech and went to Wilmington High School this year?
This year, we haven't lost many. If we had any, it was only 2 or 3. That would be ninth graders. I'd have to go look at the numbers as far as upperclassmen because there may be a couple of those that have decided to go back as well.
Yeah, because we had just seen a chart from Wilmington Public Schools, and I thought it was a little bit higher than that. But
it may be.
Shawshing Tech kids that left.
I can get that number for you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll gladly share it with.
So the reason that I'm asking you these questions is that obviously if a student chooses to go to the tech, they're searching for something that they're not going to get at the high school. But financially, the town pays for that student for the full year.
Yep.
And if the student goes to the tech and decides within a few weeks or a month, or the tech decides for them, we have paid for a service that we have not received. And then that child ends up back at the high school. My only question is, and maybe it's more difficult than you could imagine, but how do we make sure that the child that's making the decision to go to the tech is truly going to be successful there? And that it isn't something that for a number of other reasons, they're avoiding going to the high school. Because it costs the town a lot of money. And there's also a cost to the student.
Yes, leaving,
and
coming
to the
back,
student's
making all those
family
changes. Yeah.
of all those changes and so on. So, that's my concern. I'm concerned that you would receive 90 applications.
I've extended the offer to all 5 of our sending districts. We've started to host 8th grade tours during the school day. I've had 3 out of the 5 districts. Yes, 3 out of our 6 sending groups. One being Hanscom. Hanscom students attend as part of the Bedford Regional Agreement. I've had 3 towns that have not been inclined to come. Wilmington has been one of them. My personal opinion is, when I address the student groups, I come right out and I say, this school is not the right fit for every student. I'm going to be the first person to tell you that. We don't have the capacity to have every single kid from all 5 of our sending districts here. That's not realistic. But what I tell them is, go into this with an open mind, walk around the building, see the programs in action, talk to the students that are in those programs, talk to the teachers, and I encourage the staff members that are with them to do the same thing. I think that's one of the reasons why we did not lose as many ninth graders this year as we have in the past, because Burlington, Bedford, and Hanscom students all came and toured the building, saw what we offer, saw how our programs look, smell, the noises, the sounds, and everything. And I think kids are making better decisions. My personal opinion is, I think one of the best ways to address that is to have all the eighth graders come over. We'll do a tour. It usually lasts about 3 hours on a morning. We provide busing for them. We provide the tour guides. We just ask the staff come with them. We don't know, we don't know who the kids are, or, what their names are, or things like that. And I think that in the long run, I think that will address a lot of those concerns.
I will make the comment that the Finance Committee toured the tech a number of years ago, and it was so impressive that, as you're saying now, just bring them over, you would get more than 90 applications because it's an impressive school. What you offer there is very interesting and attractive, I would imagine, to young students. Well, anyway, it's something to keep in mind, that I'm hoping that there isn't something that is falling through the cracks, that we're not capturing the kids. We want them to be in the right school. That's the end goal. is
That's
to
our
have them in
mission
the
too.
right school.
And
And
we're
you
trying to
agree
do
with
everything
that,
we
yeah.
can to make that happen. Yep.
Okay, thank
Excuse
you.
me.
But just to piggyback off that, there's got to be a better way than just gear this to a tour.
So we go out, we do presentations. So we have some of our staff and our students that go to the middle schools. Those are usually half an hour, 45 minutes. We have a video that, our students created that spotlights a lot of the things we do. So we try to start and garner interest there. And then, like I said, we do have a couple of open houses. We always invite 7th and 8th graders and their parents to come to those and check out things if they're interested in it. Last year, we kicked off an initiative, they're called Career Trees, which again is kind of it's a visual map of these are the career and pathways that are available to a student just graduating from high school. Here's, you want to spend 2 or 3 years either getting additional experience or additional training. Here's a group of careers that kind of piggyback off that. And if you want to go on and get a degree, or spend 5 or 10 years in this career field, here's some professional level careers that go along with this. And we've been using that again as talking points with students and families, like, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And, does this fit? So we've tried to bring on as many of those things as we can. It's just hard. The access piece to the 8th graders, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Probably just a general question. Why do we have to lose that money if a child is going to be, okay, everybody's raising their hand, so good, okay, everybody's got an answer.
Opportunity cost is the same cost whether the kid's there or not.
Let me slide my
Opportunity
stuff
cost,
over
the
here
kids-
for you.
Yeah,
Mr.
no,
The
Sligo.
kid's there or not, the students the school's still gonna run, the budget's a set number.
Yeah, I mean, the DESI's setting of that date on the October 1st, as was spoken about earlier, is for budgeting purposes, we have to, there has to be a date. And it feels kind of arbitrary, but that's after the beginning of school, but, in time for everybody to start developing budgets. It's also important to note, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, that there's a waiting list. And so if a student leaves, sometimes another student comes in after October 1st. So that also might be a Wilmington student that we don't have to pay for. If a Bedford student leaves and a Wilmington student comes in, if it's after October 1st, we don't get hit for that on our assessment. So I think, you're right that it happens that sometimes they leave after October 1st and we have to foot the bill, but it also sometimes, with waiting lists, it sometimes also plays out that we sometimes get
a benefit of it.
Yeah, we get a benefit of that sometimes as well.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and to answer that, it goes back to, that's the way that the funding formula was established. Between 1963 and 1978, all of the regional vocational schools were established statewide. We have a regional agreement that sets out who our member communities are, how capital costs are assessed, how operating costs are assessed, how school committee members are selected. So it's kind of all governed under those Chapter 74 laws, which is similar to, but a little bit different than the Chapter 70 and Chapter 71 for the regular education programs.
Thank you.
Just so I can, just in my limited experience, which is limited, most of the ninth graders who return to their member districts do so towards the end of the year, after after shop selection for their 3-year time has done, because invariably the trades are full, and not every student who wants to get a slot in electrical or in plumbing or in HVAC or in any of those trade positions, they inevitably are offered another shop that may not be their top 3 choices, and that's when they start to say, maybe this isn't for me. So in my again, limited experience, only 2 years, when you lose freshmen, you lose some at, in September, October, because they've made a bad social decision or think they've made a bad social decision. My friends aren't here, I don't want to deal with this, or I just don't like the environment, or whatever. And then it kind of peters off, and then you get a drop for all 5 member communities because of the tightness of their facilities in the electrical shop, in the plumbing shop, in the HVAC shop, et cetera. So that's been my experience. It may have changed since I was there, but that's kind of how I've seen the transition of kids back to member districts. And then it drops off, a
Few
kid
kids
here
here,
or a
few kids
kid there, which they at least Shushing doesn't always fill from the waiting list, because the kids don't, once they're in 10th or 11th grade, they're kind of like committed to where they are, and they've established their friend group and stuff. So I know that's really in the weeds, but that has been my
That's a good point.
I think that's a very good description. Again, I've spent my whole career in vocational schools, so I have a little different lens, but I would agree. Those are typically the first 4 to 6 weeks of school. We run a very different schedule than a regular comprehensive school, where the kids are in academics 1 week, they're in shop the other week. For some kids that are 13, 14 years old, that is just something that they cannot make the adjustment to. It just doesn't work with, they've been in school where they've had the same teacher that they've seen every day. For 4th period I see Mrs. Smith, and 5th period I see Mr. Jones. They come in, we do week on, week off, and for the first 3 quarters of their freshman year, they go through 14 different technical programs. So each shop week, they're starting with a new group of upperclassmen, a new group of instructors, a new program that they have to learn and figure out. And then I do agree with Mr. Jackson that, towards the end of that, we have kids that come in and their heart is set on, I'm gonna be a plumber, I'm gonna be a plumber, I'm gonna be a plumber. And if they don't make it into that program, a lot of times those kids will take a step back and have a conversation with their family and be like, yeah, I don't want to stay. This isn't what this isn't what I signed up for. So, that's been my experience over 25 years, 26 years, whatever it is now.
Thank you, that's a good point.
Back to me.
We wanted to give you a breather.
Yeah. So I have concerns about the increases in costs. I don't want this to come across. I think you run a spectacular program there. I think the programs that are done at the tech are unbelievable. People I talk to who their kids have graduated there say, they're great programs. So I think you're doing a great job with your programs. The costs, though, continue to rise. So what I took note of initially, what got me kind of digging in here, was Wilmington's costs, the portion of Wilmington's costs for next year are going up $298,000. We're going to have, our allocation is 16 fewer students. So I did I did kind of analysis 2 different ways. I'm going to talk about the operating costs. I took out capital because I, understand that, that's kind of a different thing than the operating budget. So I look back over the last 4 years. That's how long I've been on the committee. So I've, had easier access to all the numbers there. So the cost per student for Wilmington alone. In FY24, the operating costs increased 11.25% per student. In 25, it was 4.85%. In 26, it was 10.15. In 26, it's going to be 10.15%. So a total of 28.5% over 4 years of increases. And we're going to have, according to the budget, it's 9 fewer students. It's not a sustainable number, in my opinion. I also did this for all 5 communities to kind of look at the total to see if Wilmington's the outlier. In FY24, it was for all 5, the cost to the communities for just the operating was a 10% increase. FY25 was a 4.66% increase. And FY26 was a 9.15% increase. So operating costs for all 5 communities keep on going up at a staggering rate, in my opinion. How do we combat that? What are we going to do here? Because we can't keep doing it.
I understand.
At some point, the levee breaks here. And in my opinion, we're getting close. And where it's, a collaborative of the 5 communities, one community doesn't have very much of a voice here. We have our 2 school committee members who do a great job of actually watch some of the meetings. But Wilmington's getting hit really hard here. So what can we expect in the future, and how do we slow this down?
Again, we've tried, we're trying to utilize different funding sources. One of the things that we don't typically include in our budget proposal is grants. We get $1.4 million to renovate our metal fab shop, which is going to be at 0 cost to any one of our 5 sending communities. We get about an $800,000 grant to do an expansion on our masonry program, which again was another grant. So we are trying to explore those things. And again, I'm a taxpayer, not in this community,
Yeah,
but I understand all the pressures on all the school systems and everything that's going on. And this is not an excuse, but the nature of the programs that we run are more expensive than a conventional school system. I know the conventional school, I shouldn't call them conventional, but your traditional school systems are struggling with similar problems with all of these increases. Again, I'm sure all of you watch the news. I'm literally losing sleep over, there's going to be a 20% tariff on steel, on copper, on aluminum, on, and you go in our plumbing program and the kids are soldering, they're threading steel pipe, they're cutting PVC, they're doing projects. It's the same thing in HVAC. You go in the metal fab shop, they're cutting up sheet steel, they're using welding electrodes. It's concerning. And again, I know I go back to that 2.91. We were shooting for a 3% overall increase. And I shared that with the town managers early on. I said, this is my goal. I know depending upon how we break stuff out, that is a little different. And I will concede that point. But we are trying our best to hold those things down. There are a lot of programs that were brought forward to, additional things that people wanted to bring online, things that people wanted to expand. And I said, we're not in a place to do that. We just don't have the capacity to do those things. So we're trying. We're looking at potentially doing a master schedule update. And again, in the process of that, hopefully that will help us balance out some of our staffing needs.
Okay.
And hopefully we can make some progress on that as we move forward.
So the master schedule update, is that something that you're going to plan doing this year? Is that over the next couple of years?
So we're going through most of the planning and preliminary stuff this year. Our intent is to launch it in the fall of '26.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be for this upcoming school year, it'd be for the following school year.
Okay. So capacity for the school is around 1,350, right? Somewhere around there?
School was built for 1,000 students.
Right, I know we're well over, yeah.
We're well over
Yeah.
that, but yes. I mean, ideally, I'd like to see 350 in 9th and 10th grade, which is 700 kids. And then if we have three, you know, if we can maintain 325-ish for 11th and 12th grade, I mean, that gets us to about 1,375, somewhere in
Okay.
there. That would be my target.
Okay. In other, the total cost per student, and it's another thing that has continued to go up each year. So I have your book here. Is it the just under 40 million, the 39,959,681?
Yep.
That is on page 13. But then I would suggest you have to add in the transportational aid, because that is a cost to operate the school, and the E&D for the capital costs. So I would say your total costs to run the school next year are $41,730,952. Divide that by your number of students, and we're coming out to $32,551 per student.
And that per student cost has increased significantly because our enrollment has dipped.
Yes.
I'm
Yep.
keenly aware of that, yes.
Okay.
And that is
All
part
right.
of the reason why we are working and trying to be as diligent as we can to raise those student enrollment numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Again, we don't lose staff when, you know, we bring in a smaller group of kids, we still have the same needs. You know, our metal fab program still has 3 instructors, our plumbing program still has 4 instructors. We got to get those numbers up, and that's been something that, again, I've been pushing and I've been working towards for the past 2.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And one final one about this year's budget itself. FTEs, how many are we adding this year?
2.
Just the 2?
Just the 2 pairs.
Okay, it's
Yep.
the 2 pairs and that's
Yep.
it?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
What about the nurse?
That was last year.
It says 25 is 2, 26 is 3.
So at the end,
Seems like one more.
we had 2, it is. We had 2 nurses and an LPN.
Okay.
The LPN retired at the end of last school year.
Yep.
So what we did is we replaced the LPN with a 3rd nurse. It is not a change in the number of FTEs, it's just a different person filling that role. So we went from employing 2 school nurses and LPN to employing 3 school nurses.
So where's the minus of the LPN?
So that was
Because we're going up
incorporated into-
125 grand for the cost of the nurse. How much did we take out of the budget for the LPN?
Off the top of my head, that was probably a $68,000 to $70,000 position.
But again, where is it?
So it would have come out of that nurse's line item.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not. Okay. Which
That's why I
page
see-
you on,
That's
sir?
why I see an
Yep.
increase. I'm on page 36 of 58. That's why I went from 2 to 3, and if it had gone from 3 to 3, I'd be okay, because,
Yep.
Yeah.
and why did we feel the need to hire a full nurse instead of another LPN for double the salary, too? I mean, again, it's 60 grand on a $40 million budget, but it
Yeah.
is just,
Yeah.
doesn't jive up with what you're,
There's another one too on page 33 for ELL.
Yep.
There's
We added
another.
another position to that last year.
So it says there was 1 in FY25 and then there's 2 in FY26. Is that?
Yep.
again,
So
that
there
feels like
there
an
has
increase.
been some cleanup in this. So
Okay.
that EL budget was being pulled from a different department, when we
So
only,
it's
when we only had
moved.
1 person. So
Okay.
it's been moved into that one. And I believe the same thing, and I can look and find out for sure, but I believe the same thing happened with the nurse's salary, that the para salary was pulled from somewhere else, and then we
Right.
readjusted, if you will, for the
That
FY26.
ELL, though, that seems odd to me, because the person that we've added is getting paid more than the person we had. And
We-
usually when you add new people, they come in
We
at
had
a
an
lower
internal
level.
transfer.
Okay.
We had a
All right.
long-time English teacher
Yep.
that was dual licensed that moved
Okay.
into that role. Yeah.
That makes sense now.
Any other questions from the committee?
Do you have any retirements this year? Need to fill?
Five that I know of so far. I anticipate we'll probably get a few more before June 30th. Some people wait till the end to make up their mind, but and one administrator as well. As of right now, it's one HVAC, two health assisting, one math teacher, one English teacher, and our longtime vocational director made the decision that he's going to retire at the end of the school year. So we're currently looking to fill that role as well.
So that might offset a little bit. New teachers might command
It
less
might
money.
lower the budget.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just one last thing. Congratulations, Super Bowl champions this year. And did you just win the wrestling state championship as well?
They won the vocational wrestling, and I believe the boys basketball team won the vocational boys basketball, and I believe the hockey team won the vocational boys hockey team.
I can't even keep up with them all.
Neither
I get
can
so
I.
many.
So those are the ones that I know of. So there might be a couple others there, but yes, we had a very good winter sports season. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Great. Again, would you kindly state your name for the record?
Yes, it's Kevin McDonald. Before I make my comments, can you just tell us if you've reviewed the auditor's report and the name of the auditor for the school finances?
No, I don't have that information.
Have you reviewed the audit?
We have not received it.
Is there a reason why?
I don't know.
Okay.
So in any event, Mr. McDonald, you are still limited to 3 minutes.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Neville, for drilling down. Looks like you're the only one that's really put the effort into that. Mr. McIntosh, can you tell us the name of the auditor for your school finances and how many years in a row they've been auditing you?
Through the chair, would you like me to respond to that?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
kindly.
The auditing firm was Markham. They've recently been bought by a company called CBiz. So depending upon where you fall, they're either Markham or CBiz, depending upon whose letterhead you happen to get. Last year was our first year with that auditing firm. Before that, it was Daniel Dennis for as long as anybody in the building can remember. We are on track. Our business office was working with Markham CBiz the last week or the week before, the week after school vacation, whatever, it's all a blur now, to finalize the stuff for our FY24 audit. So we are on track, and they have told us that we should have it by the end of March. They weren't as great with their delivery timeline last year, so we'll have to wait and see if that's when we actually get it.
Thank you.
And that audit is publicly reviewed by your school committee at an open school committee meeting?
It is, yep, the audit subcommittee reviews it, yep.
On your website?
Yep, and I believe it's also sent to the town managers
Thank you.
after it's been approved.
Thank you.
And just to point out, I divided the $54.4 million in the public school budget by the 2,817 students. Wilmington cost per student is $18,254.71. So you compare that to $32,000 per student for the Shawshing Tech. It's a lot of money. I did want to ask you
we
if,
have twice the staffing as well. We don't just run English, math, and science. So when we staff, we have to staff 20 vocational programs and offer an EL program and offer special ed services and offer speech therapy. We have to provide all of the same services that Wilmington Public Schools does. And, again, run all of those vocational programs, take staff and take people to run them.
Thank you.
And have you figured out how much money from your last year's budget has gone into free cash for the town, or is that going into the capital stabilization funds? Can you just explain all the funds that the excess goes into?
So the only fund that we have that's excess is called excess and deficiency, and it's certified by the Department of Revenue every year. So the Department of Revenue comes in, we submit all of the documentation for what we took in, what we expended. They audit all the accounts, they look at the end of year balances, and the Department of, and again, I believe this also goes to the town managers when it's certified. The Department of Revenue certifies our E&D balance, and if for some reason we're over that 5%, they also indicate in that letter how much money would be returned to our sending communities.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
one of the-
Mr.
one of the-
McDonald, you're out of time.
No,
I'm sorry.
No.
You're
That's
out of
his time.
time.
No, that's his time.
Thank you very
No,
much.
I'm not going to stop
Thank you very
talking.
much, Tony, for-
What I
for
also
meeting
wanted
with
to
us
mention
tonight.
was that with
right,
regard to the
moving
students
along,
that
we
go to the
have-
Shawshene Tech
we have some
who
minutes.
sign up for
We have minutes
education,
that need to be
when they sign up
approved.
for a course like plumbing, and then
Thank you,
they
Mr.
think that they're
McDonald.
going to be a plumber, and then they get denied the course,
So-
I think it's a real shafting of the students.
first set of
They should tell
minutes
them
is
that
January
before
30th.
they even enter that school.
If anybody has a motion,
I make a motion to accept.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimous.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tony. You're welcome to wait a couple of minutes.
Our next set of minutes is February 4th, 2025. If I have a motion,
So moved.
and do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. And finally, February 11th. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept the minutes of February 11th?
Do I have a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Tommy, thank you for these. They're great.
Tommy, would you please note that Anthony Nelson had to leave for a family event, and he has not participated in the voting, although he was here at the beginning of the meeting.
Will do, thank you.
So I just want to make sure that the minutes for tonight are correct. Okay, do we have any other business before the board?
A motion to adjourn?
Well, hold on a second.
Oh, I thought we were done.
No, no.
It's late, I haven't had dinner.
I'll let you go when I'm ready. Okay, so I just want to.
Whatever you need, Teresa.
I'm sorry?
I said whatever you need.
Thank you. So March 18th, we will be meeting with the planning board for a public hearing, a joint meeting. We'll go over all of the warrant articles. And then we will meet as a finance committee on March 20th in this room at 7 PM to vote on everything. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. And I think we're free next week. I
Nothing
don't know
next
if anyone has any ideas, but, you know. Okay. Okay, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I want to stay.
Motion to adjourn.
May I have a second? All those in favor?
I'm opposed.
Thank you all very much.